Welcome to all my Late Night Mysteries listeners. Thank you for tuning into today's episode. Not all voices that call to us should be answered. The allure of the past, especially when tied to loss and longing, can draw us into dark and dangerous places. It's important to recognize when to seek closure and when to protect ourselves from the things we can't fully understand. Some mysteries are better left unsolved, and some doors should remain closed. I am Wraith. This is Late Night Mysteries. You are listening to Listener's Tales Edition.
Disclaimer: this is a work of fiction. Any names, characters, businesses, places, events, or incidents are fictitious. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or actual events are purely coincidence.
This is a tale of love lost and found, of voices that refuse to be silenced, and of a quiet house on the outskirts of a small town where shadows linger long after the lights have gone out. It's a story told not from the eyes of the one who lived it, but from the one who witnessed the slow unraveling of a life bound to the past by an unseen tether. Listen closely as Sarah, a faithful helper and silent observer, shares the eerie events that led to a final, inevitable goodbye. In the end, some calls are better left unanswered. This is her story.
Hello, my name is Sarah. I lived in a small town in Bath, England. I have a mysterious yet strange story that I experienced that chills down my spine, and I have longed to share it with no one. Until now, here in Late Night Mysteries. I've worked for Miss Margaret Ashford for several years. I would visit her daily to help with the chores, cleaning and cooking, at her old Victorian house on the outskirts of town in Bath, England. She's always been a woman of routine, steady, predictable, and a bit lonely. She's not married and has no family to take care of her. We've developed a quiet but comfortable rapport. But then things started to change. This happened a year ago. It was just after I arrived one morning and I noticed something was off. Miss Ashford, normally so composed, looked rattled. She was pale, her eyes shadowed by sleepless nights. "Is everything all right, Miss Ashford?" I asked, concerned. She hesitated before telling me about the strange phone calls she had been receiving, always at midnight, always from a voice that sounded oddly familiar, calling her Maggie. The name meant nothing to me, but it clearly unnerved her. Who would call so late? I wondered aloud. but Miss Ashford could only shake her head. She mentioned contacting the phone company, but they had no record of the calls. The whole thing gave me the creeps, but I tried to reassure her, suggesting it was probably some prank. But the calls kept coming. Every midnight, the same voice, the same unsettling message. "Maggie, come to me." Miss Ashford began to change. She was jumpy, distracted, and the bags under her eyes grew darker. It broke my heart to see her like that. I could tell the calls were taking a toll on her, and I wished there was more I could do. One morning, after yet another sleepless night, Miss Ashford confided in me. "No one calls me Maggie, not since..." Her voice trailed off, and for a moment she seemed lost in the past. Then she told me about a man named Thomas Henry, her childhood sweetheart who had died in a tragic accident decades ago. He was the only one who had ever called her Maggie. The very idea sent a shiver down my spine, but I didn't want to show it. I tried to be the voice of reason, though deep down I felt a growing sense of dread. What if this was something more than just a prank? Then came that stormy night, the night everything changed. Miss Ashford called me that midnight, her voice trembling as she recounted the latest call. "Thomas! It's Thomas! He wants me to come to the cemetery," she said, barely able to speak the words. I stood there numbly. Cemetery? Of all places during this stormy night, I couldn't let her go alone, so I insisted on coming to her home and accompanied her to the cemetery. I drove my car in the middle of the stormy night and arrived at her home shortly. Miss Ashford grabbed her raincoat and we set out into the storm. Miss Ashford sat beside me in my car and I drove to its destination. The wind howled around us and the rain came down in sheets, but we pressed on. There was something almost magnetic about the pull towards that cemetery, as if some unseen force was guiding us. When we reached the cemetery gates, a strange calm settled over the place. The storm seemed to hush as we walked among the graves. I tried to stay close to Miss Ashford, sensing her growing unease. Then we found it. Thomas, Henry's grave. What we saw there sent a chill through my bones. A phone line cable of all things lay across the ground, its end resting on the gravestone. It looked like it had fallen in the storm, but there was something wrong about it. The cable seemed to pulse almost as if it were alive. This can't be real, Miss Ashford whispered, her voice shaking. I wanted to tell her it was just a coincidence, but even I couldn't believe that. There was something about that cable, something unnatural. It felt like it was more than just a piece of fallen equipment. It was a connection, a bridge between this world and something darker. We didn't stay long after that. I grabbed Miss Ashford's arm and we hurried back to the house, barely speaking a word. Whatever had happened, it was beyond anything I could explain. After that night, Miss Ashford disconnected the phone and the calls stopped. She seemed to recover, though the experience left its mark. I stayed by her side, helping her as always, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed us back from that cemetery. 3 days later, everything changed again. It was a quiet morning when I arrived at Miss Ashford's house. The air was still, the storm long gone, but an eerie silence hung over the place. When I knocked on the door and got no answer, a deep sense of dread settled in my stomach. I let myself in, calling out for her as I entered the house. "Miss Ashford! Miss Ashford! Are you there? Miss Ashford?" I called out her name, trying to look around for her. Suddenly, my heart sank. I found her in her bedroom, on her bed, the very spot where she had received those strange midnight calls. Her face was peaceful, almost as if she were sleeping, but I knew, deep down, I knew she was gone. Miss Ashford had passed away. There was no sign of struggle, no indication that she had been in any pain. It was as if she had simply let go. I wanted to believe she had found peace, that whatever had haunted her had finally released its grip. But as I stood there, I couldn't shake the feeling that Thomas Henry, or whatever remained of him, had come back for her. And this time, she had answered the call. I stayed until the authorities arrived, barely able to process what had happened. They said it was natural causes, her heart simply giving out. But I knew there was more to it than that. In the weeks that followed, the house remained empty, and I couldn't bring myself to go back. And though she's gone, I know Miss Ashford finally joined Thomas Henry. Wherever that may be.
Sarah learned through her time with Miss Ashford that some mysteries are meant to remain unsolved, and not every call should be answered, especially when it comes from the shadows of the past. Witnessing the tragic events unfold, she realized that the weight of unresolved memories can draw a person into dark and unforeseen places. In the end, Sarah understood that while it's natural to cherish memories, it's equally important to let go and move forward, lest the past consume the present. Sometimes the best way to honor those we've lost is to live in the light rather than follow them into the darkness. Some shadows never fade, and some connections, no matter how unnatural, are never truly broken. Well, that's all we have for today. Once again, I am Wraith. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Late Night Mysteries.